Raider Nation, what is going on? Eddie Paskal here, and thank you for joining us for a special edition of Upon Further Review, brought to you by the good people of Coors Light. Joined by my man Q Myers to talk all things roster reductions. Q, the Raiders, like every other team in the NFL, had to, by the 1 o'clock deadline today, go from the 80 limit, Raiders a little under that, 253. We'll start here. We'll start with the obvious one. Alex Leatherwood, the first-round pick from a year ago, no longer a member of the Silver and Black. And Q, 1 to 10, surprised, not surprised? Where do you come in?
Well, I think it'll probably be maybe around a 5, as far as surprise, only because we've heard the rumblings for a little while, and we heard the rumblings that all options are on the table. And, I really think that this regime gave him every option and opportunity to make the squad as a starting right tackle. And, we were out there every day for training camp. We were out there for the preseason games. We saw everything that he did, and I think that he worked really hard. It just seems like at some point in training camp, he lost his confidence. When you don't have your confidence, especially at that position, it's hard to get it back. So he's a young man. He's only been in the league 1 year. Sometimes a change of scenery is all you need. And so I think that he still has the tools. There's a reason why he was drafted, right? He has the tools to get it done. He just didn't have the tools to get it done with the Raiders right now.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, man. I think he just, obviously from the outside looking in, and as much access as you and I have,
right.
We're not in these guys' heads. We're not in those conference rooms where these cuts and these decisions are being made. But to me, it really felt like Alex was a dude who kind of lost his mojo a little bit towards the end. Kind of just, I don't want to say ran out of gas, but just lost the oomph that he kind of had. And let's make no mistake about it, right? We've all talked about it. We've all seen it. His rookie year featured a lot of good moments and a lot of moments that were not so good.
Right.
So I think to come into year 2 understanding the pressure of like, I got to perform, and I got to perform now, and I got to perform every single day.
Right.
Like I said, I don't want to get too much into his head at all, but it definitely felt like he lost that something special somewhere along the way.
Yeah, and it did feel like that at the beginning of training camp. It looked like he was starting out on a pretty good note, and it seemed like every time he met with us, during the media sessions, he was pretty up-tempo and pretty upbeat. And then there was a certain point where it kind of seemed like it broke a little bit, right? And, that happens, and that's with every profession. It's not just a football player. If you don't have confidence in what you do, if I can't go behind this microphone with confidence, I'm not going to do it very well, right? So I think it was just a confidence thing. And, again, I think that the Raiders did him a favor. Maybe he gets picked up by a team now that maybe the expectations aren't sky high like the Raiders have, and they allow him to develop. This just, to me, was a situation where there's no time to develop. This is a team that's ready to win now.
And I think it's important that we clarify, just for the sake of logistical, transactional stuff, is that Alex Leatherwood and the rest of the guys who were waived, right?
Yep.
Air quotes waived, are going to have a chance to go through waivers,
yes.
right? Meaning the 31 other teams will have a chance to put a claim in there. So there is a very real possibility that Alex Leatherwood has a new home, a football home, 24 hours from now. And in speaking of just the designation between waived and released, all that stuff, head on over to Raiders.com. We have it all laid out there, the entire release from our public relations staff. It is a lot of moves, so Q and I are not going to go through them one by one by one. But yeah, for everyone's clarity and to understand kind of what the next 24, 36 hours look like, head on over to .com. Our people there do a fantastic job. And Q, going back to the offensive line, and we started talking about Alex Leatherwood. It's what everyone is going to be talking about.
Of course.
From Schefter to Rap Sheet, all those guys, including you and I.
Yes.
What I want to focus on is the guys that made the team.
Yeah.
Right? I think that it's important. I think in moments like this, we really focus on the big, flashy headlines of the first rounder's not going to be on the team. Oh, my goodness. Well, I want to focus on the guys that essentially played him out of a job.
Yeah.
And I think the two that come to mind, first of all, Jermaine Illuminor and Thayer Munford.
Yeah.
Right? Two guys that are going to be a part of this team, are going to be a part of this program going forward. Those two guys in particular, I think it's going to be really interesting to see them battle out that right tackle position throughout 2022.
It really will. And, both guys have really good stories, in my opinion. And stories don't make a roster, but they do have really good stories. And I really respect Jermaine Illuminor. Without really being prompted or asked, he came out and let it be known, like, hey, in Baltimore, I blew it. In New England, I blew it. Even last year with the Raiders, when I had an opportunity, I kind of blew that opportunity. So I know what I have to do and step up and be the guy that they all expected me to. And for this regime who knew him from New England to still have the confidence to put him out there and say, hey, the slate is clean for you just like it's clean for everybody else, I thought that went a long way. And I really believe that Jermaine Illuminor took advantage of that. And then on the other hand, you look at Thayer Munford. He's a 7th-round pick out of Ohio State. Normally when a guy's a 7th-round pick, you don't really look at him as a guy who you think is going to be competing for a starting job. But I feel like at some point this training camp, he was competing for a starting job. And who knows, what he's going to end up doing after today, just knowing we haven't seen him in a little while. But still, the guy came out on his own as well and said, hey, I was dealing with some issues that were, some mental health type issues. I went and saw Gene. I mean, I never knew who the counselor's name was until he brought it up. Now I know Gene's the guy. And he said, hey, they have a really good program here. And I just got out of my own head. And, he credited some of his teammates. And he said, I'm in a much better place right now. So, again, stories don't make rosters, but I like to see guys that make rosters that have stories.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that you brought up that kind of circled in my head is we've heard from Jump Street, from Josh and from Dave as well, that they were coming into this opportunity with everyone was getting a clean slate, right? And you look at the moves they made today. I mean, just because someone's a first-round pick, just because someone's a seventh-round pick, just because someone's an undrafted free agent, like that didn't mean anything to them. They were evaluating people objectively based on what have you done throughout training camp, what have you done in the offseason program, and what have you done over the course of the past month of the preseason. So I think that Dave and Josh deserve to be commended for really kind of sticking to their guns, for owning what they've said from day one, and now putting it out in practice.
That's the thing about it. You always hear, coaches and GMs when they take over a new job.
It's coach speak, baby.
Yeah, coach speak. You'll hear what you hear, what you hear, and then they won't practice what they preach. But looking up and down the roster, you could tell that these guys practice what they preach. The guys with the most versatility, the guys that fit this team better with the vision that they have of how this team is going to move forward are the guys that are going to make the squad, regardless of where they were drafted, when they were drafted, what the expectations were when they got drafted. It doesn't matter. If you can go out there and play and help this team win, you're going to find a spot on the roster. And if you look up and down that roster, it's exactly what they have.
And speaking of other guys that made the team, we finally have clarity on the wide receiver room.
Yes.
That's been something that we have all talked about a lot over the past couple weeks. And I will admit, and I've been pounding the Keelan Cole drum from day one, a little bit surprised, me personally, that he's not going to be a part of this program going forward. However, big shout out to T. Billy and DJ Turner for doing enough to make this team.
Yeah, really. And DJ Turner was a guy that I was kind of on the fence with. I was thinking, well, I just don't know if he's really an NFL wide receiver, but I know he has special teams return ability, so maybe that's the way. I mean, the guy's a burner, so he has an opportunity to just make the big play. But, with Keelan Cole, I was surprised as well, but then I saw him in the preseason game on Friday night playing late into the game, right? And that's the fourth preseason game, so I thought, well, maybe that's a little bit of a sign of what's to come. And, look, I don't think this is anything against Keelan Cole. I just think it's tip of the cap to the guys that made it, right? The guys that made it, as you talked about with the offensive line, literally pushed him out of a job.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it a lot, especially over the past 7 to 10 days. There are going to be a lot of guys that were cut or waived today that are they're not going to be jobless for very long.
No, there's talented guys.
Yeah, when we wake up tomorrow and the notice comes through tomorrow, meaning Wednesday, there's going to be a lot of former Raiders that are on 53-man rosters, and I think Keelan Cole, it very much kind of fits that mold.
Oh, I agree 100%. And again, I mean, he was a guy that I was surprised to see playing in preseason game number 4, but it goes back to the depth of that wide receiver room, and that's why it was such a topic that we talked about all training camp. How are you going to make this decision? How are you going to, find a spot for everybody, or who's going to be the odd man out? Because there's a lot of dudes that are talented. And look, shout out to T. Billy. T. Billy's a guy who's a fan favorite. I mean, he has his own fan club that I don't even know where it came from.
Yeah,
but that's fine.
Now that we know he's going to be here for a minute, I really think we need to dive into that a little bit more,
right?
Because for a guy, and I mean this with all due respect, for a guy who hasn't necessarily found a ton of on-field success early in his career.
Especially consistently, right.
Very early in his career, in these first few chapters, this man has a following, a diehard fan club that is incredibly impressive.
It is. It really is. I mean, any day we were out at training camp and fans were there,
T. Billy calls? Like, what?
T. Billy! Yeah, that's all we heard. And, I mean, hey, again, shout out to him for somehow creating this fan club. I mean, between him and Beyonce, man, I think they're right there neck and neck.
I mean, at this point, T. Billy should, when he's done playing, just think about a career in politics, really start a grassroots movement for whatever platform he plans on running on. But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, big congratulations to him for putting it together. DJ Turner, another guy too. And I think I was a little more bullish on DJ Turner making the 53 than you were, just because I know I sound like the broken record, the special teams ability that DJ has. And I think that when you look at this room now, and we finally have our final picture, at least for now, of what the wide receiver room looks like, DJ Turner brings something that's a little bit different than the other guys in there.
No, I agree. And that's that speed, and speed kills. We know that, right? Shout out to Cliff Branch. Just was enshrined into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Speed kills, and DJ Turner has it. He turned a crossing route into what I thought was going to be a 15, 20-yard gain into a touchdown. Right? I mean, just with the ability, and that's what speed does. You can't teach it. He has it. He has a big play ability. And the one thing about him that I saw and witnessed over the course of training camp and preseason, he continued to just push, and want to get better, and knew that the odds were kind of against him because, I mean, look, he's not the biggest dude in the world, right? So, I mean, that's already tough in the NFL. He knows that there's a lot of talent in that wide receiver room, and he had to go out there and show what made him different, what separated him. That goes back to what you're talking about with special teams.
Yeah, I mean, DJ Turner, a guy who's listed at 5'9",
right,
206.
and that might be generous.
Yeah, and I've been listed at 6'2" and a half my entire life, and I'm not even getting close to there.
Right.
But what I think really excites me about DJ, and now as we kind of like look ahead to the regular season, I think Josh McDaniels can do some really, really interesting things with him. And we saw it a little bit in the preseason, right? Having him operate out of the backfield, putting him in motion, doing all these kinds of things. And like I said, look, talent-wise, you are never going to think that DJ Turner is Devontae Adams. You're not. Like, we understand that.
No.
But he does bring something very unique. And that skill set, combined with Josh McDaniels' like, offensive acumen, I think that he has the chance to be a really kind of fun, interesting Swiss Army knife, I think.
You can get him the ball anywhere.
Yep.
As long as he has the ball in his hands, he can make something happen. And that's a unique talent. Everyone can't do that. Like you said, line up in the backfield, line up in the slot, end around, whatever the case may be, he can do it.
And you need to have guys like that who also contribute on special teams to fill out a 53 and to have your 46 guys on game day, because the more you can do, the better.
He's a guy that when he's on the field, other defenses, they're not going to look at him like Devontae Adams, like you mentioned, but they'll say, watch him. Because they know he's got the speed and he has the big playability. So they're going to pay attention to him. And if they pay attention a little bit, a slight second longer, that might open up someone else as well.
And you got to respect that, too. You got, like, if you're a defensive coordinator, like you said, he's not going to get 100 targets this year or anything like that. But you got to respect the fact that, this dude, if they can get him in the right position, is faster than our guy. And like that's as simple and kind of rudimentary as that is. If you're a defensive coordinator, you got to be able to account for that. So I think he's, as I said, a very interesting piece. I'm excited he's on this 53-man roster, and I cannot wait until week 1 to see what kind of wrinkles Josh throws his way.
Right. Well, it's going to be the Wild Wild West in the AFC West, right? With all the talent that's on all of these teams in the AFC West, I mean, you can never have too much skill. You can never have too many big playability, and that's what DJ Turner brings to the table.
Speaking of sticking with the Seal guys for a second, I think both you and I surprised in a good way that all these backs, excluding Austin Walter, managed to make this team.
Yep.
I think if we were to have this conversation 2 weeks ago, I thought, okay, maybe you can sneak Britton Brown through on waivers, get him back to the practice squad. And also another thing, the practice squad will be coming out in the coming days. So, we're saying goodbye to a lot of people, but there's a good chance that we're going to be welcoming a lot of these guys back.
Right.
But after what Britton Brown did these final couple of preseason games, I don't think there was any chance this dude was going to clear waivers.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. And it's funny when I put together my little 53-man, because, we all have to do it. We're not going to get it right, but we have to do it. I reluctantly put him on the practice squad, and I said, I know as soon as I do that, he's going to get snatched up by another team. But I just felt like the running back room was so packed, and it's another conversation we've had all training camp long. What do you do with all this talent? Right? I mean, there's so much talent, and Britton Brown has really been proven that the guy he was at UCLA a year ago when he was averaging about 6 yards a carry is who he could be in the NFL. Not necessarily that all the time, but he could be a NFL running back. There's no doubt about it. So I'm glad they found a way to keep him. I think he's going to be a big asset.
And then we talked about earlier about how Josh and Dave have been true to their word and kind of being who they are. And one thing that we saw from all of Josh's teams in New England, they like to keep a lot of backs. And not only did they keep a lot of backs, they utilize a lot of backs. And I think that's very much going to be the case this year in Las Vegas. And especially when you go through that room now, that room is nuts. You go Josh, Zamir, Britton Brown, Amir Abdullah, Jakob. I think I got them all. Did I miss anyone?
Brandon Bolden.
Forgot
about him.
But it really is. We talk about all the wide receivers kind of bringing something a little bit different to the table. I mean, you could have that exact same conversation with the running backs too.
Well, no doubt about it. And it's one thing. It's going to keep everybody fresh all the time, right? Someone's always going to be fresh. Someone's always going to be ready to go. Josh, I believe, is going to obviously be the workhorse if you say workhorse. But with so many guys, and look, every game, every one of these guys is not going to be available. They won't all dress out every single game. But still, that throughout the course of an 18-week and 17-game season, you're going to have a fresh running back and a guy that can get it done, and you don't look at it and say, oh, Josh isn't in there. Man, the talent level just dropped a lot.
And I think what's great as we kind of now look out to the next 17, 18, 19 weeks, whatever it is, to your point, you're always going to have healthy bodies, but I think that when we get towards November, December, and historically speaking, right, in the NFL, if you want to have success in the early winter, whatever it is, you got to be able to run the ball.
Yep.
You're going to be going to places where the weather isn't super conducive to throwing the football 75 times, and you have to be able to control the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
Well, it helps when you have a really fresh Josh Jacobs. It helps when you have Zamir White, who hasn't been hit 700 times in the first 9 weeks of the year.
Yep.
So I think that Josh and Dave playing the long game, but it'll be really fun too to see kind of week by week the change in the plan and how they kind of put each individual guy in a position to succeed based on who the opponent is.
That's the thing right there. That's the biggest key. You hit it on the head based on who the opponent is and who's the better matchup. And that's the one thing that, as I've done a lot of research this offseason, training camp, preseason, everything on who Josh McDaniels is as a play caller, he is great with the matchups. And that's not just game to game. That's series to series, play to play. Like, he'll see what everyone's doing, the defense is doing, and he'll switch up what he's doing. And it's a credit to him to being almost a mad scientist where he's able to go into the lab quickly on the sideline and figure out, okay, this isn't working, let's go to this, and then it works.
I think really my only big question, and big is much too big of a word,
okay,
but I wonder, like, 4th and 1, who's getting that ball on the goal line? Is it Yaka, you think? Or is it Zamir?
I think that Yaka will get it a little bit. But I think that you'll see either Zamir or Josh. I mean, I think those are your two power backs. I mean, I really do. And Brandon Bolden, I think he's a guy that's going to catch a lot of passes out of the backfield. Amir Abdullah, I think he's going to be kind of a Swiss Army knife. You just do whatever and get the ball in his hands, and he makes it go. But yeah, I look at Josh Jacobs and Zamir as the two guys that are just going to pound it in there and get that 4th and 1. And then, oh, by the way, Britton Brown's there as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like
another option.
Yeah, a wealth of opportunity and a wealth of resources for Derek Carr at the line of scrimmage there. I think one thing, as we kind of zoom out, I know we've talked about Leatherwood at the top and the fact that he's not going to be here. I think it is important to bring up the fact, though, that every single member of the Raiders draft class this year made the 53.
Right.
And that is a very unique thing in the NFL. And that's not a bad thing at all, but you just look at the way the teams are built now,
right,
and a 6th-round pick doesn't make it, or a 7th-round pick gets hurt, whatever it is, starts the season on IR. All 6 of the Raiders draft picks are going to be on this first 53, and that's pretty impressive.
It really is, but look how they were built. Look how Dave Ziegler and company decided to build it through the draft. They attacked the trenches, and they got the running game going, right? I mean, you got 2 offensive linemen, you got 2 defensive tackles, and then you got 2 running backs. So, I mean, that's areas that they wanted to make sure that they had covered. They knew the offensive line was a work in progress. The defensive tackles, they wanted to make sure they could stop the run, and I think both guys that they got in Farrell Jr. and also Butler, I think those guys are not only going to contribute this year, but going to be big-time players later on, and I think that's really good for them. But, yeah, I just noticed the way that they got them in 2s. I thought, you know what, all these guys have an opportunity to contribute, and I think we see all of them contribute this year.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, and I think, I don't want to say like the wild card at all, but I am interested to see where kind of Thayer Mumford kind of plugs into this situation. I mean, I feel like we have a pretty good idea of what to expect from Parham and the running backs and those kind of guys, but Thayer Mumford, like we talked about it earlier, a guy who a few weeks ago felt like he might be on that inside track to getting the start at right tackle. Obviously, the injury bug had something a little bit different to say in that regard. But I am curious when he's healthy, when he's 100% right, where he kind of figures in. But switching to the defensive side of the ball for a hot second, another pleasant surprise: Darian Butler and Luke Masterson sticking around. I thought it was going to be one or the other. If I was a betting man, which I'm not, I had my money on Mr. Butler. But I did.
Really?
I did. Because similar to you, where I was like, man, we've seen a lot of Luke Masterson in this final preseason game.
That's true.
But congratulations to both of them.
Yeah.
2 undrafted rookies sticking around in silver and black.
Yeah, and at the linebacker position, right? And that's been an area of need for the Raiders for a very long time. I mean, you see that they had to go out and make a move for Denzel Perryman to bring him in last year, which was a great move. He ended up being a Pro Bowler. But, if you look at the long game, like we've talked about with Dave Ziegler before, he's playing the long game. These guys have an opportunity to grow with this team. Masterson, I think, and what I saw firsthand on Friday, I couldn't stop raving about that interception he had because he did everything technically sound. Right? I mean, you could put that play on a cut-up for a coach and say, look, linebackers, this is what you do. This is how you run this play. Everything he did from the drops to the slide step to being in the right position, allowing his teammate also to make a play to set him up so he can go get that interception. I thought he's done some really good things, especially wearing the green dot as an undrafted free agent that, oh, by the way, is moving from safety to linebacker. I think that's a big deal as well, right? Something that's probably not talked about enough. But both guys, man, it's so funny putting my 53-man roster together. I said, just like you said, it's one or the other. It's not both. when I got down to it, and this is why I'd be a terrible GM, I was like, I just can't cut one. I'm going to keep him. I'll cut someone else somewhere else. I got to keep both guys. So I kept both guys, but I did it reluctantly. I thought Butler was going to end up being gone.
But I think the one thing that was really interesting about Masterson is that he's wearing the green dot. And we were so spoiled last year with Denzel Perryman. Right? I mean, just send him out there. Yeah. You know exactly what he's going to get. The odds are Denzel Perryman's going to miss a series here or there, and you have to feel good. You have to be comfortable about whoever it is that's going to come in, and whether Luke Masterson actually ends up being that guy, we will have to wait and see. Right. But man, the fact that you have multiple people now on this roster that if you're Dave Ziegler, if you're Josh McDaniels, if you're Patrick Graham, and say, hey, we need someone to give Denzel just a little bit of time to get his mind right, get his body back. Right. Here you go, and you know that the ship isn't going to go down.
Exactly. I'm excited about the youth that they have at that linebacker position. Again, that's something that, Raider Nation could tell you that linebacker has been a question mark for a very long time. There's been multiple times in the draft when the Raiders have tried to address it and it just hasn't worked out. But you get these two guys as undrafted free agents. I mean, think about that. You're getting them as undrafted free agents, and they have an opportunity to grow with the team and, by the way, get some burn this year as well. And I do think you'll see Masterson play, and you'll probably see him play quite a bit. Right? And Butler as well. And I think Butler having that experience with Antonio Pierce, the linebackers coach, does not hurt. He knows the way that Antonio Pierce coaches. He knows what he means. I mean, the language is just the familiarity, comfortable. I think all that makes a lot of sense. So they got some good ones right there.
And then we talk about looking ahead and DZ playing the long game. These are guys that are going to be on team-friendly contracts for a minute.
Yes.
For a minute. So if you hit on one of the two, now that gives you the opportunity, it gives you the flexibility to maybe address other needs of your roster where you have to maybe dip into the pocketbook a little bit.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm like the biggest advocate of like the UDFAs and the special teamers, but like it is important to hit on some of these guys. You don't have to hit on 9 or 10, but you got to get a few.
Well, the good teams do that. That's what the good teams do. I mean, the good teams, they can afford to trade a first-round pick because they'll hit on that undrafted free agent. They'll hit on that late-round pick, and you see them all around the league. You always wonder, how can this team afford to do this? How can this team afford to do that? Because they hit on guys that aren't drafted. They hit on guys that are lower level, and they're on those team-friendly deals, so they can put a little bit more money into the quarterback position or the left tackle position or a wide receiver. There's different options that they have when they do a good job of scouting and getting guys that other teams aren't looking at.
Yeah, and I think that's where, and the Raiders have such a rich tradition of hitting on these UDFAs. I mean, you look at A.J. Cole's a perfect example.
Right.
Marcel Reese, another perfect example. Donald Penn, a guy who had a really nice career here, wasn't a Raiders undrafted free agent, but a guy coming through the undrafted ranks. Right, we see it year after year after year that there is such value there. Jalen Richard, another guy who was here for a minute.
He was only in for a weekend tryout.
Yeah, man, he was like, hey, I got one call, I'm gonna go see what happens, and you wake up 4 years later and you're like, oh, I had a nice little run here in the silver and black. So it is important. I think that there's value there, and to your point, the good teams, the ones that kind of have that flexibility when that moment comes, because that moment comes for every team. Every contending team says, hey, we feel like we're close, but we need X. Do we have the financial flexibility to go get X? Well, it helps when you got these guys on the roster.
We need Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
So you go get Devontae Adams, that means you got to hit somewhere else, right? 100%. So if you're able to get a couple undrafted free agents and they're guys that can grow with this team, then hey, then you did your job. And even not having a pick until the third round when they did, but you get a guy in Dylan Parham who looks like he could play 3 different positions. That's almost like getting 3 draft picks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the keys that they laid out when they took over the job and they said, this is what we're looking for, it wasn't what, like we said at the top of the show, it wasn't coach speak. It was exactly what they wanted, and they went out and got exactly who they needed.
And another guy I just want to give a little bit of love to, Sam Webb.
Yes.
Man, Sam Webb. And I'll be honest, when I was doing my 53, he was one of the real questions, like, like, what do we do with Sam Webb?
Right.
Credit to him, man, for doing enough, showing the staff enough that, hey, I'm going to stick around here. I'm going to be a part of this program.
And he might have, I don't know if he did or not, because obviously we'll never know, but he might have stolen the job on Friday night, that 4th preseason game, because he played a lot. He did play a lot, but he played sound. He played really well. You saw his coverages were perfect, and he took a lot of pride in what he was doing as well. You could see that he didn't want to give up anything. He was really fighting with the wide receivers out there. He was playing some good ball, and I remember, all weekend long, like, man, that's Sam Webb. He really showed out. So I thought that was he played some good, solid ball, and I don't know when he won a job, but I know what he did on Friday night didn't hurt.
Yeah, and I think that'll be interesting to hear someone. ask DZ and Champ about that later this week about, hey, what was the moment for a couple of these guys? I think Sam Wood's a perfect example, but like, what was that moment with Britton Brown? Right. There had to be something where they looked at each other in the box and they're like, well, he's not going anywhere now.
Right.
So
I think get rid of him.
I think that's like a really interesting thing to kind of go down as now we have 12 days, 11 days, whatever it is
Something
before
like
the
that.
start of the regular season.
I lost the track of the date about 12 weeks ago.
I know. Dude, I'm with you, bro. I'm with you.
How long has training camp and preseason been going
19 weeks.
It feels like it's been. I feel like we already gone through a season.
I was 22 years old when this training camp started, Q.
Right?
I was 22.
There you go.
Real quick, though, tight ends, keeping 3. You got Foster, Darren, and Jesper Horsted. I think a bit of I don't want to say a pleasant surprise, but a bit of okay, good for you, man.
Well, the way that Josh McDaniels like to run his offense, you're going to see multiple two tight end sets, and you want a guy that's a blocker as well. And so I think that's really where Jesper, he butters his bread, right? He's able to be a good blocker as well. So that makes sense. I actually had 4 on my final 53 just because I thought that they were going to need multiple blockers, especially with the question marks at the offensive line. I thought maybe that can help out as well. But 3, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with it. And to your point, Mr. Horst, a guy who can contribute on special teams too.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
You need to have your third tight end. You got to be a dude who can contribute on special teams. Jackson Barton also makes the team.
My guy.
Yes, your guy, man.
That's my dude. It's so funny. I always had a vision of him. I saw him one time in training camp, and he looked over. Someone called his name from one of the fans or something. He looked over, and he looked like such a mean dude, right? And then I talked to him in the locker room the other day, and it was like, man, he seemed like just the coolest, like a big teddy bear, man. He was a super cool dude, though. He was very, he just happy to be there and said, hey, man, I left everything out there on the field. And look, he had a really good training camp and had a really good preseason. I thought he did a good job at the tackle position, so I was happy to see Jackson made the squad. Yeah,
and another thing, and, it's just the reality of the NFL, is that this is a guy now who's one, sprained ankle, one, bum knee away from being like, all right, man, like, I'm glad you're happy to be here, but you got to go to work now. You got to go to work big time.
Exactly, yeah. So I think that they made a good decision keeping Jackson. Like I said, I thought he put in some really good film during the preseason and training camp and really went out there and earned that job and kept his head down and just grinded. And that's all you can ask, man. That's all you can ask is these guys to go leave it all out there on the field. And I'll say this, man, following that 4th preseason game, even though 4 preseason games seem like so many games, I asked head coach Josh McDaniels following on Saturday, I said, hey, man, how pleased were you with just the effort from your guys? Because nobody looked like it was the 4th preseason game and they were just trying to get it over with. They looked like they were leaving everything out there on the field. He said that's exactly what they did. So he was really pleased with that.
Yeah, and I mean, he should. And I think, he should also be pleased with the work that him and Dave Ziegler have done over the past couple months, making it. I can't imagine that it was a very fun or easy past 36 hours for those guys.
No.
I mean, the beauty of putting together a really good roster is you got a really good roster.
Yep.
The kind of, not bad side, but the flip side of that is that you got some really, really tough decisions. And the Raiders let some objectively good football players walk out of this building over the past couple of weeks. But that is a credit to how good this roster is and how good this roster has a chance to be going forward.
Yeah, that's something I said a couple of weeks ago, that when the Raiders make their final cuts, it's going to be some talented dudes walk out the building. And again, it's not anything that they did. It's just the other guys did it better.
Yeah.
Or the powers that be, the front office decided that this guy he provides more different options for us, and so he can help us in more different ways and capacities. And so it's just the nature of the beast, I mean, when you go back to Keelan Cole, he's a very talented wide receiver, really good player. He just got beat out by some guys that looked like a little hungrier and could provide a little bit more versatility, and that's the name of the game.
And like I said, I think the ultimate compliment to the job that DZ and Josh have done is that I don't think Keelan Cole is going to be jobless for very long. I don't think a lot of these guys that the Raiders parted ways with are going to be jobless for very long. And we talked about it at the top too, like, don't sleep on the fact that a lot of these guys can come back to the practice squad, especially with the way the practice squad designations are, where you have those veteran spots for a guy like a Keelan Cole. Not saying it's going to be him, but in years past, you didn't have the ability to bring some of those guys back.
Yeah.
Now you can.
Right.
So it'll be very, very interesting to see who does end up back here later this week. Before we get out of here, though, Q, just some late breaking news per Adam Schefter. Trayvon Mullen is now on his way to Arizona, reportedly.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be interesting to see kind of what Trayvon does in kind of this next chapter. But I think maybe his departure freed up a roster spot for Sam Webb or someone like that.
I agree. And Trayvon Mullen was a very talented dude, or is a very talented dude. Coming out of Clemson, I remember I was pretty excited about, him getting that opportunity because I thought, man, this guy could play, right? I remember everything he was able to do in Clemson. I still remember his first start against the Houston Texans, right? I mean, I remember being there in the building and, asking him after the game, like, man, how did it feel to get out there? Man, it felt good. And, he just looked the part. Unfortunately for Trayvon Mullen, the last season we saw was just a bunch of injuries. And that's if your best ability is availability, and no one likes to hear it, but it's a reality.
Yeah, and we talk about, guys that maybe just need a new environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
They need a fresh set of circumstances. And Trayvon was always incredible with us.
Right.
I think obviously we're a little biased for a lot of these guys, or towards a bunch of these guys in a good way. But he was great to deal with, man. We wish him nothing but success.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting to see the compensation the Raiders do ultimately get back for him. And kind of another thing to ask Dave and Champ about it is kind of what that decision, kind of what the repercussions of it were for guys that made this 53-man roster.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's it. And, in some reason, and the cornerbacks that made the roster obviously made this availability possible. If they didn't feel comfortable with those guys, they wouldn't have made this kind of a move, right? So that's a good question to ask, and just, what was maybe the tipping point or whatever. But, shout out to Trayvon Mullen. I think he's a very young, talented dude, and still, again, a young dude going into the final year of his contract. So, contract years usually get the best of guys. So, maybe Arizona's going to be getting a really good one.
Yeah, absolutely. On the way out, Q, you look at this 53-man roster, and I think it's very important that we really hammer this home. The roster will change.
Yes.
The roster is a living, breathing, fluid organism.
Right.
Right? But we look at the 53 today as we record on a Tuesday,
Yes.
Tuesday
Sure.
afternoon, as we record on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
Kind of just your biggest takeaway from this initial 53.
Oh, I just think it's a very talented squad, right? I think that the Raiders have a very talented team that's ready to go out there and compete, and I think that every position group looks like it's pretty solid. Like, I don't look at any position group and say, ooh, that's going to be a big problem, including the offensive line. I think that there's some really good guys on the offensive line that now have to continue to grind and grow together. The offensive line and the continuity is the most important thing. So now they have a couple weeks before the season opener against the Chargers to get together and say, okay, we've got to become one great unit. We all made the team. Now let's get together and be one solid unit, because the weapons that are on this team could be special. We got to protect DC.
Yeah, 100%. And we have talked about it a lot. I think ultimately that is what this is going to come down to. Yeah. Can you give Derek Carr time to operate and do his thing and get the football to all these incredible weapons that Dave Ziegler and company have kind of assembled? I think for me, when I look at this initial roster, Q, yes, this is an exciting roster. This is a talented roster. I think you can make a very fair and reasonable argument. This is the most talented 53-man roster Raiders fans have seen in a long time.
Very long time.
I think for me, though, and as crazy as it sounds, I look forward to even 2023 and beyond now.
Okay.
You look at kind of this young nucleus.
Yeah.
We talked about every single Raiders draft pick from this year made the 53-man roster. There is a lot of exciting young players on this team. You talked about the offensive line having a chance to grow together. We're going to see this young core, this young nucleus, with the peppering of that really important veteran-savvy, veteran contribution. But I'm really excited for what this team looks like this year, obviously.
Yeah.
But let's build this out 12, 24 months. I mean, the Raiders have the chance. And look, they got to go out and they got to do it on Sundays. But they have the chance to build something really, really exciting and fundamentally sound. And it started with this first 53.
Yeah, and that's the goal for every team, right? Is to go out there and not just be good for 1 year. They want to have that consistency. They want to have that, that team that can grow for year on top of year. So every time you go into the regular season, it's like, yeah, that's a playoff team right there, because they've been a playoff team for the last 8 years or whatever the case may be, right?
I mean,
that's
we see that with teams in the division too.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You want to continue to build that. And the one thing I know about this regime, based off what they've done at other places, is at certain points, they have so much talent continuing to rotate in, they're willing to let someone walk maybe a year early. Maybe a year earlier than they normally would, because they have a very talented dude coming up behind them. This team has, to your credit, a lot of young talent coming up behind some of the savvy veterans that they have as well.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting time, and now it's all ahead to week one, right? It's getting through this.
Let's go.
This next 10, 11 days, right? Seeing kind of how the roster kind of changes and morphs. But, man, now it's all eyes on the Chargers. I cannot wait.
Yeah.
Big thank you to Q for coming to hang out today. Make sure you listen to him on Raider Nation Radio, 2 to 5, and in the Raiders app, of course.
Absolutely.
We'd love for you to listen to it. But, yeah, man, you do a fantastic job. Big shout-out to you and the 920 crew. Big thank you to Ray for keeping us operational, Alexandra and everyone else back in the control room. And it's time to go, Q.
It is.
It's time to do it.
Let's
we feel
go.
good. It's time to rock. So, for Eddie, Paskal, Q, Ray, everyone else here, thank you for hanging out with us. And we will catch you guys next week back on our normal day, because we're going to be in regular season mode for our first, put it in caps, Ray, our first regular season edition of Upon Further Review.